Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction. We have a very interesting article that was published by different pro-Ukrainian sources. Russia is transferring military equipment and manpower to the front line in the Zaporizhzhia region to strengthen its group, said the head of the Center of the Study of Occupation Pyotr Adryshenko. He publishes photos and videos of the equipment being transferred, which he calls the largest for July and August. In addition, according to him, Russia is transferring equipment and artillery from Berdyansk to the north of the Donetsk region, from a brigade to a regiment of personnel from Crimea has also been sent. So this author is telling us that the Russians are trying to reinforce their positions somewhere in the vicinity of the cities of Kamyansk and Orekhov, and when talking about this direction, I believe that first of all, the Russians are trying to strengthen their positions with the purpose to repel possible Ukrainian counterattacks in this direction. Furthermore, according to the same source, the Russians are moving their forces from the settlement of Berdyansk, which is located in the south, let's say eastern part of this region, in the direction of the northern part of Donetsk. When talking about this redeployment, we believe that the Russians are trying to strengthen their positions in the Lyman direction or in the Siversk direction, where the Russians are about to take under complete control the Serebryanka forest. For example, when talking about this direction, obviously the Russians are strengthening this position with one purpose: to take these settlements under complete control. So the entire direction, the city of Lyman, the city of Siversk, and all these villages between them. You know that currently the Ukrainians are facing very difficult situation. Everybody most likely in the world understands that Ukrainians most likely will not be able to restore control over the borders of 1991. And the only thing that Ukrainians can do right now is to win some time. They can win a day, they can win a week, they can win a month, and maybe they can win a year. A year with the purpose not to allow the Russians to take under complete control the Donetsk region, where the Russians are advancing. And when talking about the entire Donetsk direction, so this is the last territories that the Russians remain take for them to establish complete control over the territory. Very interesting situation currently we can see, because right now we are at the stage of the special military operation when three different group of forces will attack this territory, the last part of the Donetsk region. We're talking about the group of forces south, which operates in the area of the city of Pokrovsk. We're talking about the group of forces center, which will storm the city of Kostyantynivka, and of course we are talking about the group of forces west, which operates in the Lyman and Serebryanka directions. So three group of forces have one single task: to restore complete control over the Donetsk region and probably to end the special military operation. So that is why the only thing that the Ukrainians can do, as I told you 5 minutes ago, is to win some time. But for these purposes, and the only way to win some time, is to carry out their own counter-offensive operation. And we believe that this is the reason why the Russians are concentrating their troops in the Zaporizhzhia direction with the purpose to repel possible Ukraine counter-offensive operation if this counter-offensive operation happens ever. Anyway, we believe that Ukrainians don't have much time, and if they are planning to start any counter-offensive operation, it's time to start doing this right now. Today, tomorrow, maybe the day after tomorrow, but obviously not in October or November of 2025. Now let's move further and let's discuss additional updates that are coming from the line of combat contact. And first, let's talk about the situation in the area of responsibilities of the group of forces east, where the Russians continue offensive operation in the western part of the Donetsk region, and currently there are just 3 villages left for the Russians. There is a village of Kamyshevaha, there is a village of Alexandergrad, and there is a village of Andreevka-Klivtsova. Just 3 villages left for the Russians to take the Donetsk region in this part completely. And as you can see, according to geolocations and according to different updates, by the morning of the 11th of August of 2025, the Russians managed to get every single village and to get as close as possible. Currently, the distances between possible range positions and all these villages varies from 1 kilometer probably to, let's say, 2 kilometers, and that's it. So it seems that the Russians have been prepared themselves before the beginning of their final rush, which most likely is going to happen during the next 5 days before the meeting that is going to take place on the territory of Alaska. Now let's talk about the Pokrovsk agglomeration, where the Russians continue their breaking through operation. Very interesting situation takes place here, and when talking about this direction, I would like to point your attention on several things. First of all, I would like to take a look with you on this video. Very important video that was published by the Russian sources, and in this video we can see a Geraint drone that was flying above the main supply line M30 between the city of Pokrovsk, the Pokrovsk agglomeration, and the city of Dnipro, and this Geraint drone was dropping mines on the main artillery that Ukrainians used to supply their forces. So this is very interesting, and this is probably unique, let's say, moment. The Russians use Geraint drones with the purpose of distance mining. So this episode that you can see right now in front of your screens took place exactly in this area, in the vicinity of the settlements of Slavyanka, Andronovka, Kamenka. Once again, Russian drone were dropping mines on the road main supply arteria, and in the second part of this video we can see how Ukrainians were trying to use this arteria probably to bring forces as close as possible to the city of Pokrovsk, but several vehicles were damaged and destroyed on the mines that were dropped by the Russian drone. So this episode took place exactly in this area, and this video confirms that the Russians established complete control over the M30 road, one of the most important supply arteria that Ukrainians have right now. And as you can see, the losses are getting heavy, probably higher and higher. The Russians control this road probably in the vicinity of the city with artillery and FPV drones. And when talking about the deeper part of the road, the Russians established control over this territory with Geraint drones that can mine this area using the distance mining method. Very interesting situation that can be a turning point in the entire special military operation. If you have no possibilities to bring forces to the line of combat contact, this means that you will lose the line of combat contact very fast. As for the city of Pokrovsk, the Russians are moving. The Russians are not moving so fast, probably, but they're moving. For example, during the previous 24 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. Several mappers reported that the Russians, as a result of clashes, managed to take under complete control the settlement of Lyantovichi, which is located in the southwestern part. Several blocks were taken by the Russians. Also, the Russians improved their positions in the most southern part of the city. So once again, this territory was secured by the Russians during the previous night, and this territory was also secured by the Russians. We are talking, first of all, about a regular army of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, not about the sabotage and reconnaissance group that were discovered and sported much deeper inside of the city of Pokrovsk itself. But it seems that despite the fact that the Russians are moving on the inside of the city itself, we see that the city of Pokrovsk is not the primary target for the Russians. We see that currently the primary target for the armed forces of the Russian Federation is the northeastern part of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. We are talking about this territory that we've been discussing during the previous several days. So today we got additional details that I would like to point to attention. First of all, let's compare the map between the dates. I would like to remind you that just yesterday, pro-Ukrainian resources reported that the Russians managed to improve their position significantly in this direction by taking under control additional territories and by outflanking of the settlement of Novoshakovo, Volne. This information was confirmed both by pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian resources, and today we got additional changes on the ground provided by neutral mappers. Neutral mappers confirmed Russian breakthrough in this area and adjusted the map once again in Russian favor. So what is the most important about this breakthrough? Once again, more and more sources are saying that indeed the first groups of the sabotage and reconnaissance forces of the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to get the settlement of Zolotoy Kolodets, which is very important and which is located very far from the line of combat contact, deep inside of the territory of Ukraine, we can tell, deep inside of the Donetsk region. And the main value of this attack is not just that the Russians managed to break through this area. The most important thing is that the Russians managed to get the second defense layer of the entire Donbass. I would like to remind you that since the beginning of the special military operation, the Russians mainly were focused on taking under control all these trenches and fortifications that Ukraine started building in 2014. So as you can see, all these yellow dots, all these yellow lines are trenches, strongholds, and fortifications fortifications that were created by the Ukrainians. And this is the first Donbass layer of defense. And during the special military operation, the Russians slowly but step by step were moving through this defense layer. At some point, the Ukrainians realized that they are about to lose this defense layer completely. So that is why in 2014 and 2024, more precisely, the Ukrainians began building the second defense layer of Ukraine. And this defense layer starts somewhere in the Kharkiv direction, in the vicinity of the Pechenegi water reservoir. Then this defense layer goes along the river Oskol. Then this defense layer enters the Donetsk region and moves to the west and to the north of the main cities, Slaviansk, Kramatorsk, Pokrovsk, and so on. And the thing is that the second defense layer goes exactly along the city, or by the name of not the city but the village of Zolotoy Kolodez. So this Russian breakthrough that was recorded and published by different sources, by neutral mappers, by pro-Ukrainian resources and by pro-Russian resources, means that the Russians not just broke through Ukrainian defense, first defense layer, the Russians entered the second defense layer. And the thing is, and the most important thing of this situation is that there is no third defense layer. So the second defense layer is the layer that the Ukrainians are constructing right now. They're trying to build this defense layer right now, and the Ukrainians, according to information we have that we can find from the open source, still haven't managed to finish creation of this defense layer. The Ukrainians haven't managed to finish this creation, and the Russians have already entered this second defense layer, which means that if the Russians are able to move further in the northwestern direction for another 5, let's say, or 10 kilometers, this means that the Russians will be able to bypass the second defense layer completely and to enter operational space, without any defense and fortifications from the Ukrainian side. And this might be probably the biggest or significant breakthrough ever since the beginning of the special military operation. And most likely this is exactly what the Russians are trying to achieve right now. The city of Pokrovsk and the Pokrovsk agglomeration is a very important target, but first priority is to move further in the direction of the defense of the second defense layer, and we see that the Russians succeed. Now let's talk about the Kostyantynivka agglomeration, where the Russians also continue their offensive operation. During the previous 24 hours, additional changes were recorded along N32 road. This is the situation by the end of the 10th of August, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 11th of August. The Russians improved their positions, and it seems that the Russians are planning to attack the settlement of Stepanovka. At least right now, the Russians are trying to outflank, and this is very important. And another important thing is that the Russians are trying to get as close as possible to the city of Kostyantynivka from the west itself. So we should expect additional breakthrough of the armored forces of the Russian Federation in these fields, also in the northern direction, with the purpose to get as close as possible to the villages of Rozinska, Dovga-Balka, Stepanovka, Mikolopilya, and of course further in the direction of Drushkovka. As for the Kliban-Byk, we have additional changes, we have additional updates more precisely. First of all, we have this video that was published by the Russian sources, and in this video we can see close combat between Russian soldiers and Ukrainian soldiers in the area of the village of Katerinovka. 4 Ukrainian soldiers were trying to attack Russian positions on the territory of the settlement, probably something like a counter-offensive operation, but Russians called for help, and FPV drone operators sent several drones that attack Ukrainian stormtroopers and destroy them. So this episode took place exactly in this area, which means that the Russians have control over the village of Katerinovka. Maybe this control is not so strong, but the most important is that the Russians confirm their presence there. Furthermore, the Ukrainians, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, were caught in cauldron in the area of the village of Kliban-Byk. In the village of Kliban-Byk, dozens of Ukrainian soldiers were surrounded and are now forced to surrender, the Ukrainian channels write. Kliban-Byk is located to the south of Kostyantynivka, and its northern outskirts abuts a large reservoir of the same name, as well as the Krivoy Tarets River. It is likely that the road leading to Pleshchevka was cut off by the Russian armored forces, and the Ukrainian armored forces units have nowhere to retreat. So this is exactly what we were talking about during the previous several days days, the Ukrainians were caught in cauldron completely on the area of Kliban-Beg. They tried to counterattack Russian positions in this area with the purpose to stabilize the situation, but obviously the help, there is no place where the help can come from to support these Ukrainians. At the same time, the Russians continue their offensive operation in the direction of Alexandra Shultine. And today we have additional changes on the ground, as you can see, that were provided by neutral mappers. And these changes are telling us that most likely in coming days, the village of Alexandra Shultina would be also taken in by Russians. Another important article was published today by some pro-Russian resources. Today we got report that the Russians reported that it's time for Ukrainians, for civilians on the territory of Kostyantynivka, to prepare themselves before the beginning of clashes on the territory of the city itself. So this is an article. This article was published by a very reliable resource who operates in the area of Stupachki Pritiechina, and they stated that Kostyantynivka, all civilians remaining in the city, should urgently prepare for the start of urban fighting. So, which means that the Russians are planning to enter the city of Kostyantynivka most likely from the southeast, from the villages of Alexandra, Shultin and Pritiechina, and most likely this is going to happen in coming days. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Lyman Series direction, where most likely the Russians managed to break through Ukrainian defense. Once again, I would like to point your attention and remind you the article we discussed at the beginning of the video. Russia is transferring military equipment and manpower to the front line in the Zaporizhzhia region to strengthen its groups, and also in addition, according to the same source, Russia is transferring equipment and artillery from Berdyansk to the north of the Donetsk region. And during the previous 4 or 5 days, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly in the area of the city of Serebryanka and in the area of the city of Siversk. So approximately on the 5th of August of 2025, the Russians launched their offensive operation in this direction with the purpose to establish complete control over the forest of Serebryanka. And since that moment, almost every single day, we were adjusting the map in the Russian favor. The Russians were advancing, taking more and more territories under complete control. So, for example, this is the situation by the 5th of August of 2025, and this is approximately the moment when everything started. This is the situation by the end of the 6th of August of 2025. The Russians managed to break through Ukrainian defense in the eastern part of the Serebryanka forces and to cut and cauldron Ukrainian forces in this area. This is the situation by the end of the 7th of August. No changes were recorded, just several pro-Russian resources updated their maps in this area in Russian favor. But on the 8th of August, we continue receiving progress on the ground that was recorded by pro-Ukrainian resources. An additional breakthrough was recorded to the southwest of the city of Dibrova. We're talking about this part of the forest. By the end of the 9th of August, we had additional changes on the ground that were recorded by different sources. That were reported, first of all, by pro-Russian resources. By the 10th of August, we have additional breakthrough in this area. The Russians managed to improve their position significantly and to cut and cauldron another additional group of the armored forces of Ukraine. And by the beginning of the 11th of August of 2025, the Russians managed to secure this territory almost completely. Ukrainians currently control just less than 50% of the entire Serebryanka direction. So this is the situation, and these changes, as you can see, were provided by neutral mappers. And that's it for the short video. Military Samurai channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.